Greetings. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you do stuff here? Got my glasses on tonight, man. Feeling intellectual. So we're just starting here. So I guess we got it on all our streams. We should check it out to make sure that's the case. Facebook. Let's go look. Hopefully we're going to get some turnout, man. Yeah, there I am. So, hey, you know what we also need to do is we need to remind people tonight we talk student debt. That's what we're doing. Somebody's already joined. Let me get my chat in there. Feel free to plug something into the chat if you have something to say, if you have a question, if you just want to say hi, whatever. I'm getting us set up. I'm trying to invite our guest. I've never invited a guest before. I probably should have tried it before, but that's what I'm doing. So I gave him a stream. I don't know where he is. I don't know how that works. We're going to figure that out. But tonight we're talking all things student debt, kids. And why are we talking all things student debt? Because it's a big deal. You know, it really is. There's a lot of people, and we're going to talk about why that is. All right, post that. So, tonight, one of the big news pieces here, let me see. Let me talk to my friend, make sure that we got this straight. Let's see if he's online. If I can tweet him. There, here we go. Did you get the link? Question mark. Try to be forgiving. Oh, there he is. All right. So Alan is joined. All right. I see you there, man. So I'm going to join you in somehow, figuring all this out. What do I click that little thing and all of a sudden you're in color? Sweet. There he is.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. And I'm also going to do this. Yeah.
Perfect.
Now we're both here. I got to position myself. So good evening.
Good evening.
So big day today.
Wore my special North Carolina shirt in your honor here, Mr. Kyle.
So that's awesome. There's a lot of Carolina fans, I'm sure. There are going to be a lot of there's some Duke fans, there's some State fans, and then where we are, my friend, App State, right? So I don't know if you keep up with college football out there too much, folks, but App State's been on a roll.
I saw that game, actually. I saw that last-minute Hail Mary pass over the weekend.
Oh, against Troy? That was ridiculous. That was an amazing play. So for those that you didn't, absolutely, wasn't it?
I was lucky to have seen it live. I was like, wow, I can't believe I was even watching this game. And then all of a sudden, that guy comes out with it, and he still had to run in for a touchdown after he caught the pass. But anyways.
No, absolutely. Well, it was funny because, he did. He had to catch it and then go run around to the corner and get in.
Yeah.
That was pretty sweet. Yeah, so I'm a Virginia fan. Can't help it. I grew up in Virginia, and they beat my alma mater, Old Dominion University, where I got my student loans.
No kidding.
They beat them with a time expiring field goal, which was okay because as a Virginia fan, I was like happy they won. As an Old Dominion fan, I would have been happy if they won, right? But
sure.
So win-win. All right. So, you talk about wins today, Alan. And what I'm going to do is first I'll let you introduce yourself, but then we can jump right into Senate passing Bill S-1098, which is separation of student loans for the first time so that people who are in abusive relationships are no longer corralled. So we can talk about that a little bit. Student loans actually got a victory today. I don't know if you saw that, but I know you're near and dear to bankruptcy. So we'll get to that too, man. I promise.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to introduce myself, my name is Alan Collins. I'm the founder of studentloanjustice.org. We've been around for 18 years now, fighting very moderately for only the return of bankruptcy protections to student loans for many years. But since COVID happened, we broke the ice on loan cancellation by executive order. Very important caveat there. The president can cancel all federally owned student loans without needing, unlike PPP loans, without needing one dime of money from the Treasury, without adding even a penny to the debt. So we've been calling for that since 2020. And thankfully, I'm happy to announce that a few weeks ago, President Biden announced, indeed, a cancellation by executive order. So we're thrilled that senators like Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer and others have jumped on. But this still all comes down to bankruptcy. But we can talk about that a little later, I guess.
Well, I mean, we got plenty of time, right? So I normally talk anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. I'm normally alone, so I would also like to thank you for being a guest here, being kind of a subject matter expert that can help me learn more, help the people who are on this call learn more, right? Of course, all this will be recorded and posted, which will help, because then if people want to come back and learn about student debt and the challenges that everyone's facing, they can do that. And I have my opinion where I believe student debt should be canceled. I believe that we should actually have free college at public universities, and that's top to bottom, right? I don't believe, sure, you got to pay for an apartment, you got to pay for food, you got to pay for stuff like that. Understandable. I believe tuition should be free because it is actually infrastructure, in my opinion. So I'm going on the record saying that. Education is infrastructure. If we have an ignorant society, we're going to have a lot of problems supporting our society in the long term, especially when technology has become such a huge part of how our economy is driven, right? And we're competing with countries like China and India and all. So when people talk, I have a personal struggle with people who frown upon students who tried hard, who had hopes and dreams, something didn't work out. Maybe they graduated, maybe they didn't, but they're saddled with this debt. And now it is an albatross around their neck versus being something that helps them become a contributing member of society. I mean, so can you talk a little bit about that? Because I mean, that it seems like is the thing. Millions and millions of people and trillions of dollars hanging around that really provides no economic value.
Yeah, the student loan program started out with the best of intentions back in 1965. President LBJ said, we could do loans and they shall be free of interest. He said that's an exact quote from President LBJ back in 1965. Well, today, the lending system has essentially been weaponized against the citizenry. The most fundamental consumer protections have been removed: bankruptcy protections, statutes of limitations, truth in lending laws. Fair debt collection practices don't apply to federal student loans in most cases. And so what began as a sort of benign way to, educate our citizens has become some kind of a predatory cash grab. And, Kyle, I'll just say, I've been doing this for many, many years. I've seen many politicians come and go. And the reason I'm so happy to be on your show here tonight is that the worst politician in Congress, bar none, on the student loan issue is Virginia Fox, which is your opponent.
It's ironically, yes. And believe it or not, so for those of you out there who don't know, a bill S-1098 passed today. It's what's called the Joint Consolidation Loan Separation Act. And I don't want to dig into it right now, but the reason I bring it up is to support exactly what you said. The strongest voice against this particular piece of legislation, which is designed to, let's say you got married, you now have to combine your loan payment, right? Your wife's student loans, your student loans, now you're on the hook for each other's student loans. It ends up you get divorced. Well, they come after you, the spouse, after your divorce for someone else's student loans. The biggest person fighting to separate those things was Virginia Fox. And all I can imagine is the reason she was doing that is because she's like, you know what? If we separate, we don't get our tentacles into that other person, and there's less of a chance we'll ever recover that debt. that's the only thing I can figure. It's like her corporate overlords don't want that to be forgiven.
You know, Virginia Fox claims to be fighting for smaller government and for families and for, liberty and so forth. But everything she ever does on the student loan problem, it benefits the lending industry and not the borrowers at all. And, in your district alone, there's over 100,000 people with student loans. 85,000 of those 100,000 people were in deep distress. So over half of them were unable to make payments at all. And this is before the pandemic, by the way. And the rest were paying and paying and paying, but their loan balances were going up. So that's 85,000 people voters in your district. More than half of them are either Republican or independent. And yet here we have Virginia Fox doing everything she can to bury these people. And I can only hope that people in North Carolina will spread the word about your campaign, Kyle. Somebody needs to stand up to Virginia Fox. And I mean, I can only think that 85,000 people, that's enough to swing a 5, 6, 7-point election, I would think, especially in a midterm year. So, people don't need to be, particularly in North Carolina, 5th district, they don't need to be sitting there feeling powerless and hopeless. They've got somebody they can vote for right now, and that is Kyle Parrish.
Well, and that's a great point, Alan. And so thanks for saying it. So I didn't mean to cut you off, man, but people do feel kind of helpless. And you bring up a good point, is I think they've been hung out to dry so long. So, I believe the accounting term is negative amortization, right? It's like a lot of people don't realize that people will pay the amount that they're required to pay for year after year after year after year, and the principal amount continues to grow due to the accumulation of interest. So there are people who've been paying loans for 10 years, 15 years, not missing a payment, who owe back significantly more than they ever had. And a lot of people are like, well, it's the government. Well, yes and no. There are loan servicing agencies that get paid a portion of these loans. There are debt collectors that get paid portions of these loans. There is an industry, as you pointed out, around predatory lending regarding student loans. And to the point you made about LBJ, I didn't know he said that about the 0-point interest, but man, Indeed. What a great point. It's like, that's what it should be. Sure, if we're going to lend people money, so saying we do have to lend people money in order for them to get an education. And that is whether it is a trade school or whether it is a doctorate, right? Whether you're going to become an air conditioning repair person or whether you're going to become a virologist that finds the next vaccine for the next COVID. It shouldn't matter, right? We support that education because guess what? You become a contributing member of society. We should not be charging fees to do that. When we privatize stuff, it always gets worse because guess what? Great Lakes is one of the servicing agencies, right? There's a couple, and there's a new one, like, I can't remember what it's called, like Medina or something like that entered. Or maybe
Advantage, Texas company. Yeah, there's it's a pit viper's nest of for-profit snakes, and most of them, some of them are nonprofits, by the way. I should say the nonprofit thing has been abused badly in this space, but all of the servicers have these perverted motivations. They can make far more money when a loan goes into default rather than remain in good stead through something called loan rehabilitation. And so the whole thing is just, it's a steal from the taxpayers, but more than that, it's a steal from the citizens. We have people, maybe even in your district, who have borrowed, maybe $40,000. They've repaid, over $100,000 on a $40,000 loan, and they still owe $150,000. Those are the sorts of numbers that we're seeing here today. People who don't have student loans, they need to take a step back and rethink everything they thought they knew about student loans, because these are like unlike any other credit instrument in our nation's history.
So let's talk about bankruptcy, because I was not aware when I started this campaign, and joining, that because my wife and I both paid off our student loans. We both had student loans. We both paid them off, and we both
Congratulations.
support. Yeah, thanks, man. And we both support student loan forgiveness, right? I'm not one of these people that's like, well, I paid my loans, you got to pay your loans. I'm like, my college was a lot cheaper because I'm old.
Yeah.
Right. So my college was a lot cheaper. My loans were a lot smaller, and I was caught in kind of a little of the beginnings of this predatory nature, but luckily I got out of it before it really got. Same with my wife. I never really looked at how much I paid back versus how much I borrowed. I just made the payments, which I guess a lot of people did. But in that, I did not realize till we got into this that unlike almost every other debt there is, you cannot discharge student loan debt in bankruptcy. Can you talk about that?
That's right. I think you just barely missed the bubble, Kyle. So in 1992, statutes of limitations were removed from federal student loans, and that made it so that the creditor could pursue borrowers literally for the rest of their lives. But then in 1997, bankruptcy was made permanently unavailable for federal student loans, thanks to some other bad people in Congress. And, the founding fathers knew, that Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Robert Morris, many of the founders, they flirted with debtor's prison at one point or another. Not so much George Washington, but Thomas Jefferson, Robert Morris actually did spend time in debtor's prison. So when these guys wrote the Constitution, ahead of the power to raise an army, ahead of the power to declare war, in the body of the Constitution, not the Bill of Rights, the body of the Constitution itself, they called for uniform bankruptcy laws. And, they had been abused at the hands of British banks and merchants and trading companies and so forth. And they felt very strongly that every citizen should have the same access to bankruptcy protections as everybody else. And that has been uniquely stripped from student loans. So it's bankruptcy. It's, you take away bankruptcy, you take away statutes of limitations, and you create essentially a license to steal and abuse. And that's what we see.
A permanent cash flow from people who are in trouble. There's no way. Think about it. I guess I'm trying to think through it. It's like, I can't make enough money to pay it. I'm negatively amortizing this thing. I can't declare bankruptcy to get out from under it. And the debt collectors are incentivized to chase me forever because they will always get paid. It is literally a Gordian knot. It's like an inescapable thing. And I think most people don't understand this. I know I did not understand any of this. I'm still learning a tremendous amount. Every time I peel back a layer of this onion, it's more disgusting. Honestly.
Every rock that you lift up, you see bad things underneath that rock with the student loan problem. And, Virginia Fox is the queen of the student loan swamp. I kid you not. Speaking of Appalachian State, I went and saw Virginia Fox speak at a candidate forum. What was it, 4 years ago in North Carolina in Boone. And I frankly had to chase her out to the parking lot, not in a violent or dangerous way.
Right. I know what you mean. You followed her like anybody who had questions that she.
Yeah, I tried to get her, engage her in a meaningful conversation, but all she would say is bankruptcy. No, end of story. That's it. She wouldn't explain herself. She refused to have a civil engagement on the matter. She's funded heavily by the for-profit colleges and the lending industry and who knows what other deals might be going on that we don't know about. But for whatever reason, I found it important enough to drive to Boone, North Carolina, and try and get engaged with her. That's how important this race is. And so I can only hope that the 100,000 people in your district with student loans, and frankly, anybody in North Carolina who cares at all about the state, they will spread the word about this man, Kyle Parrish. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, I've been doing this for many years, and there's no more important race that I could point to than this one. The people of North Carolina owe $58 billion in mostly federal student loan debt. And,
That's insane. I mean,
it's
$58
insane.
billion.
And interest alone on this is more than $3 billion leaving the state every year. What could you buy with $3 billion? I mean, 58 billion is, you could buy every farm in North Carolina for 58 billion and still have $20 billion to spare. This is the level of this problem. And these are not, blue-haired snowflake liberals running around with this debt. No, this is North Carolina we're talking about.
Right.
More than half of these people that have this debt are conservative, are Republican, or independents. There's no good reason to make a partisan, food fight out of this. This is not a partisan problem. This is a North Carolina problem.
Well, and I think you make a great point. It's not a partisan. It should not be a partisan problem, right? I mean, so when I look at it, I'm like, this is something where it truly is about that. If you wanted to say about economic development or economic increases within growth within the state of North Carolina, right now we're in an inflationary period, and some people will say it's due to wage increases, which the data does not support. There's supply chain problems the data does support, and then there's also corporate greed, which earnings reports are supporting, right? But so the reason I even bring that up is because that 58 billion and that 3 billion in interest alone that you're talking about every year that just gets paid into the government, right?
Goes straight to Washington, D.C. Goes to the books of Washington, D.C. Yep.
Yeah. And if you could actually, which then gets farmed out to corporations that don't pay taxes at the end of the day, right?
I mean, not in tax breaks and so forth.
You're basically just transitioning that money to a bunch of people who don't pay taxes or the ultra wealthy, right? Bondholders, the whole works. So, but for me to stick on track here, the reason I bring it up is you could take that $3 billion and those people would be spending that $3 billion plus whatever principal payments they're making against it,
right,
at a coffee shop, at a clothing store, at a restaurant, at a car dealership. They could be keeping that money in the state of North Carolina, in their local town, doing things that grow an economy, which in the 5th district of North Carolina, which is Virginia Fox's district and where I'm running against her, they need economic development. There are areas around where I currently reside, Cary, North Carolina, which because we have NC State, because we have Duke around here, because we have North Carolina Chapel Hill, and we have what's called Research Triangle Park, we have economic development in spades. Oddly, or not oddly, because it is a hub of highly educated people that have skills. So you get biotech firms coming here, you get Amazon coming here, you get Google coming here, you get mortgage companies, banks, technology companies, you name it. They all are gravitating this area. Areas out where they are, a lot of times their economic development is not going to be around building a pharmaceutical plant, right? You go out a little ways and we're getting some stuff like electric vehicle battery manufacturers, stuff like that. Again, though, some of this is high-tech type of things. Where the 5th district is, a lot of it in Boone, where you visited, has become tourism. Mm-hmm. So basically, the people that are there need that money to live, to build businesses, to do those things that are going to support retirement, communities, tourism, stuff like that. Taking that burden off of people could infuse these local rural economies with a tremendous amount of money. It could also help the urban economies that are struggling. A lot of people don't realize there's a huge overlap between the rural people and the deep urban people. They suffer from a lot of the same problems. Food deserts, banking deserts, lack of broadband access. I mean, all those same things exist in rural communities and exist in cities. That's why it's not a partisan issue, man. It's like this is a people issue where we're trying to help people.
You're exactly right. And, right now with inflation going at over 8% now, people have not been paying on their student loans because of the pandemic for the past 2.5, 3 years. this inflation is sucking, $400 a month out of people. And to do that, and then January 1st, all of a sudden, oh, by the way, now you have to start paying that 400 whatever dollars a month extra on your student loans. That's going to devastate not just the 5th district, but people all over the state and the country. This is a national problem. It just makes no sense at this point. This lending system, it's gone too far. It's gone over the cliff. And it used to be good conservatives were willing to stand up and fight big government. And that's kind of what this is. But here we have the just perverted, bizarro situation where people calling themselves conservatives like Virginia Fox, they're fighting to keep this lending system on the backs of their states. And, I maybe also should probably call out your governor a little bit. We're not impressed with this Biden student loan cancellation so much. $10,000 doesn't do much for the worst hurt people who owe the most and often who borrowed the least. But, this is going to be considered taxable income. And so for people who are just being hit so hard, maybe they're working at maybe younger people working at Starbucks, not working in their field, or maybe they didn't even graduate, which is 40% of everybody. $10,000 may or may not do anything for them, but for them to have to cough up $500 or $1,000 in a state income tax penalty as a result of this cancellation, that's going to hurt a lot of people, and it might not even help them.
Can I add one thing there?
Please, yeah.
I've been looking at this, right? And what's amazing is, so PPP loans in the state of North Carolina in particular,
not taxable
by the state. They actually went in and passed a law because originally, just like this, they were taxable as income by the state. And then guys like Chuck Edwards, who's the Republican candidate in NC-11, who is the Madison Cawthorn replacement, he had like $1.3 million in PPP loans. He, of course, was a voting member of the North Carolina legislature. He and his buddies wrote up a bill and got state taxation removed from those PPP loans, saving Chuck Edwards alone something like $40,000 to $50,000.
That's right. So,
but those same people are now saying there's no way we're going to forgive student debt.
The hypocrisy is just mind-blowing, Kyle. And Ted Budd also, his family got, I think, a $10 million PPP loan or something. Yep. We threw out $1 trillion in these PPP loans. 80% or 75% of these PPP loans went to people earning $100,000 or more. People like Ted Budd and your guy you just mentioned, and nobody. We didn't hear a murmur of protest. But now, when we're talking about canceling student loans, which on balance have already been paid back by the borrowers, in other words, the loans could be canceled entirely tomorrow, and the federal government would be roughly breaking even. All of a sudden, the world's going to end, and the hair of people like Virginia Fox, Ted Budd, others, particularly in North Carolina, is all of a sudden on fire. It makes zero sense at all. And I would hope everybody out there with student loans in North Carolina will realize it doesn't have to be this way, guys. We can put good people into office, even conservative. We're a fiercely nonpartisan group, but but I would just urge people to spread the word.
There are some conservatives who have supported student loan forgiveness. I mean, even as vile as he is, I think Josh Hawley was on this bandwagon for a while.
Well, Josh Hawley is co-sponsored. There's a very, very important bill in Congress right now, S-2598. It will return bankruptcy rights to student loans. Josh Hawley is on board with that. And believe it or not, there's a guy in Georgia. Georgia's terrible also, like North Carolina.
That's for those out there, it's called the Fresh Start Through Bankruptcy Act. S-2598. So just to let people know. Sorry to cut you off there, Alan.
No. Hey, I appreciate it. It's a very important bill. It's the most important bill we've seen in all the years we've been doing this.
And it's truly bipartisan. This
truly bipartisan.
And Josh Hawley couldn't be two different guys, right? I mean,
exactly right. John Cornyn, Josh Hawley, And in the House, even people, we're going to have a companion bill soon. In the House, we see people like Matt Gaetz, who will probably support the bill. Love him or hate him. I know a lot of people hate him. But it's a bipartisan bill. The time for it to pass is now. Virginia Fox and, quite frankly, I think most of the Republican legislators in North Carolina are going to be against this legislation. It just makes no sense. Something has gone deeply wrong. Even Donald Trump, believe it or not, in 2015, he was wondering aloud, why is the government making such an obscene profit on student loans? Why should the government be making profit on any loans, period? It makes no sense at all. And
Right.
so the people of North Carolina, they need to understand how important they are. They live in one of the most politically important states in the country on this issue, and they really need to stand up and fight for themselves. And I would say that for the whole entire South, quite frankly. The South is hurt far worse than other states by student loans. If you compare the average debt versus average earnings, if you compare the student loan burden versus the state budget, North Carolina is top 5 of the worst, not the best, the worst. So the state budget of North Carolina is somewhere around $46 billion, I want to say.
Okay.
The people of North Carolina, $58 billion. Like, if you were the governor, why would you not be calling for the president to cancel these loans?
Why isn't it so? Speak to that a little bit. Let's put it this way. I'm not a fierce partisan by any stretch of the imagination, right? I'm running on the Democratic ticket. I lean left. I'm not going to lie to anyone about that, but I will tell you that I certainly do not sign up to be Mr. Democrat by any stretch, and I don't defend people just because they're Dems. So why is Governor Cooper not? What could he do to do better to help with this?
Well, he could stand up and he could convince some, I would say, other more conservative leaning, whether they're Democrats or Republican governors, and simply call on the president to cancel these loans. This is a state sovereignty issue at this point. When the federal government is ripping $3 billion out of your state in interest alone every year on the backs of this unconstitutional lending scam, the governors really have to step up. So yeah, Cooper and just the whole cast of characters. I would say people like Ron DeSantis in Florida really need to step up. People like Greg Abbott in Texas. Texas owes $141 billion. The numbers are just cartoon-like at this point. The governors need to stand up. They need to throw all the partisan nonsense out the window. And I mean, you, Kyle, are a pretty enlightened guy, and I can only hope that Republicans who might watch this at some point will say, hey, I've been screwed by this partisan nonsense for too long. It's very convenient to, rip the citizens off because they were so distracted worrying about LGBTQ, all these, guns, gods, and
right?
social issues. Yeah. And people just need to be a little smarter than that and say, I'm voting for the guy who's representing my interests. And that's the bottom line. Virginia Fox is not doing that.
No. So she never has. I mean, since the time she's been elected, and it's not just about student loans that she doesn't support the interests of others. It's her general demeanor. I mean, in this thing, not to beat up on Virginia Fox, that's easy enough to do. But I mean, she has, on a different subject, which I'll probably try to get someone to come talk about, which is poverty in our area. Almost 60% of all the children in our area are on free and reduced lunch. Food insecurity across the 5th district is pretty high. What does she do? She talks about not cheating the taxpayers and trying to cut free and reduced lunch to the children. She's just an objectively bad person in many ways. So that's my opinion.
And meanwhile, the taxpayers are shoveling out these $billion subsidies to banks, insurance companies, one way or another. I mean, you just have to wonder what voters in the 5th district in Boone and around there, who's benefiting? Not that many people, I don't think.
I would love to. I should actually. We've got these universities around here. Maybe I can get a professor or two that come in and talk about kind of the issues of why partisanship drives people the way they do, kind of behavioral context.
I really think it is psychological. Yeah, please.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a psychological thing. It's like, I'm never going to vote for someone with a D after their name. You're a Democrat, you suck. And, it's kind of like, why? So, but to not drag it down that hole, back to this Fresh Start Through Bankruptcy Act. So I was just reading while we were sitting here, and it was introduced a year and a month ago, right? Senate Judiciary Committee. Why is it not being brought forth? Like, you've got literally bipartisan support. You've got the main sponsor of the bill is Dick Durbin. And it, like you said, it's John Cornyn and Josh Hawley, who are totally on the other end of the political spectrum supporting this. We have 50 votes. Theoretically, if you add those two, you've got 52 votes in the Senate. Who's killing this in the Senate? Why isn't it moving forward?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And well, first of all, I've got some great news, and that is that it is going to move. We finally got word that there will be a companion bill introduced in the House. So, but
nice.
yeah, but why was it not passed 8-10 months ago is my question. And I'll tell you, Kyle, it's a bipartisan problem, and there's also bipartisan opposition. The student loan swamp is a bipartisan beast, and whatever they say publicly, behind the scenes, there's a lot of people that really would love to keep bankruptcy gone from these loans, and that includes on the left side of the aisle as well. And I'm not going to start casting any spreading unfounded rumors, but it's just really interesting, some of the silence that we see from the left on this. I have to wonder aloud if maybe the colleges have their thumbs on the scales and so forth. But
hold it. But let me ask you that very quickly. So what you said is very interesting, because so whenever anyone says colleges, I always have this ivory tower image of the world about regular schools, right? And even private, not-for-profit schools. So I struggle with saying I would ever go tuition free for Harvard. Like, Harvard's got to charge people for what it does. It's a private school. They run their own show. All public universities, I say, let's make them tuition free. When you say colleges have their thumbs on the scale, is that you're talking about for-profit colleges? Because here's one thing with the bankruptcy. This is where I don't understand, and I need your help.
Yep.
It seems like to me, the sleaziest part about the for-profit colleges and the student loan industry itself is the for-profit colleges, basically, it's all transactional. They're like, look, man, hey, Alan, you want to come here? We can teach you to design cartoons. You can make a living. Just draw inside of this matchbook and send us your matchbook, right? And you're going to be the world's greatest cartoonist. You're the next Matt Groening, right? And all you have to do to get into our college, now that we've accepted you from your matchbook drawing, is fill out this paperwork and give us the 20 G's.
Yeah, and we're going to max out your federal student loans, and we're going to use your ass like an ATM machine. Pardon my French, but
that's what they've done, right? And
that's kind of how it goes. The for-profit colleges are the worst, but all the colleges, there's a lot of non-profit colleges out there who behave exactly like the for-profits.
The checks come.
Right, and it's become this huge cash cow for the colleges, and I don't think the college presidents out there, I can't even name one college president who has publicly called for the return of bankruptcy protections to these loans. And I'm sorry, but that's from the president of Harvard University on down the list. So
this is where I get stuck real quick. Bankruptcy protections. I know it's the nearest, dearest thing to your heart, and for very good reason. But why would those colleges that already cashed the check care whether or not you can go bankrupt now?
Well, I mean, frankly, they shouldn't. Actually, that's a good point. So nobody wants to file for bankruptcy, and quite frankly, few people should even have to when the right is returned. It's just having just having the leverage of bankruptcy back on the borrower's side, as it exists for every other kind of loan, is what's important. But so S-2598, for example, there's a part of the bill, and this is why the for-profit colleges are freaking out about it. There's a part of the bill that requires colleges to reimburse the federal government. It's a nominal amount. It's up to 50% of the amount originally borrowed. And it's up to based on their default rates and their repayment rates. So for most colleges, it'll come to essentially nothing. It'll be inconsequential. For some of the really terrible schools with super high default rates, the colleges that stuff money into the campaign coffers of people like Virginia Fox, by the way, for them, it's maybe a little bit more of an issue because they actually will have to pay a little more money. But
that's okay, right? I mean, so let's use her number one donor. Her number one campaign donor, I believe, is Full Sail University. It was the last time I looked, right? So it's a design school in Florida or something, isn't it?
I know it well.
Yeah.
They come across my desk all the time, almost more than that.
And I think they've had a couple different suits against them, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I don't want to speak ill, but I think they've actually been accused of kind of predatory practices in the past, right? So that being said, like, they would be one of these schools that possibly has to pay a ton back if like 50% of the people they graduate can never get a job with what they taught them. Whereas is that kind of the way this would work? And so these guys have a much bigger incentive to never have to pay pieces of this back because
it's similar. It's similar to that. And
okay,
just in general, the colleges, they're making so much money. I mean, they have been so well funded over through this lending program. But even the whiff of something that might cost them money, all of a sudden the college lobbyists get into full gear, and that's their battle cry, and that's what they're going to fight against. And so I am guardedly optimistic that this bill is going to pass this year. And frankly, for the Democrats' sake, it better, because the Democrats included returning bankruptcy to student loans in the DNC platform in 2020, 2016. And there's going to be a lot of just bitterly disappointed people in the country if they can't at least do that.
Well, and they can. Here's the struggle I have with all of this in my own party, so to speak. This is what I'm confronted with, is politicians lying, right? They lie all the time. They're not committed to values. They're committed to some kind of campaign donors and all that. So not to give myself an advertisement around this, but I don't take corporate PAC money, right? Maybe I should. I'd have a lot more money like Virginia Fox, and we would have a lot more publicity and everything. I plan on disclosing the people I meet with and why we're meeting, right? Because I think it's important. In this, I think I'm a big advocate for public financing of all campaigns. I believe the biggest disease we have is money in politics. And what you're talking about right here is the ability for, whether it's prestigious universities, insurance companies, banks, fossil fuel companies, student loan providers, student loan servicers, whoever these people are, to basically buy influence with politicians, because politicians need money in order to run campaigns, and then they get in that cycle, and it's wash, rinse, repeat, right? And so I mean, it's disturbing to me that Democrats aren't 100% on board with this. That's why I'm incredulous. I'm like, why?
I'm incredulous that it's been 15 years and the right hasn't been returned by both parties. It's one of the greatest economic injustices in this country, but it's what you said, Kyle. And, it's not even a lot of money we're talking about. Like, I would bet that the for-profit colleges and the servicers, they've probably given Virginia Fox this election cycle, probably, I don't know, I'm guessing $100,000 or something. And that's a tiny amount of money to keep this legalized loan scam going and keeping the money rolling into them. It's just a tragedy. It's tragic. And the people who are being hurt so badly. We're seeing people commit suicide as a result of these loans. People aren't getting married. People are they're just wrecked. And today, one of the more important things that people don't realize, older people now outnumber younger people with student loans. So these are not your blue-haired snowflake liberals working at Starbucks. People over 50 outnumber people under 25 with student loan debt, and they owe 300% more. So it just makes no sense
for their
on every
kids.
level.
I mean, well, now college is so expensive, right? So full disclosure, I have 4 kids, 2 of whom are going into college in a couple of years, right? So I'm staring down the bills for college in the not too distant future again. And so in that, it's kind of like, so do I have to borrow in order to help them get through so they don't have debt? Well, I think, if I have to borrow, well, where does that leave me after? Because I'm also getting older. I get to retirement age. I come out all of a sudden, I've got this money I borrowed on my kid's behalf. And you go, well, your kid should pay for it. It's how? Right?
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
That's the thing. It's kind of like, so whether I can pay for it, which if I can, I'm very, very fortunate. If I can't pay for it, I have to borrow money to help them out so that they can get an education. And some people would say, well, college isn't going to pay off. So yeah, if they're going to try and go to art school, I'm probably going to have a conversation with them. We're probably going to talk about going in state, whatever it is. But the point is they shouldn't be saddled. If they're going there to get educated and they're going there to make society a better place. And I think one of the things is people attack liberal arts education. They go, well, it's a waste of money. It absolutely isn't. History is vital. We're seeing that now. Political science in a regard that has civics components is absolutely vital. We need people to have education in order to protect our democracy, our country, and our system of government. And it's not all just engineers, computer scientists, right? And that type of thing that we need to educate. We need to educate people in all aspects of our society, and it needs to be something that doesn't crush them financially. And we can do that too. Like, not only is student debt the thing, but we can give free school by actually taxing organizations that hire graduates. Like, why should we all be paying to create employees for giant industries? Why aren't industries paying taxes to pay for school to educate the people who are going to come work for them and make them massive profits? I don't know.
And look at world history. What countries have succeeded historically? The ones with the most educated populations. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. And given that, we won 2 world wars, we created the nuclear bomb, we kind of won that whole game, right? Why can we not educate our citizens at least as cheaply as countries like China, Mexico, Russia, Taiwan,
You can go to Germany, and Germany will actually give.
Germany will pay you to go to college.
Pay us to go to school in Germany. I mean, so anyone that's like free isn't free. I'm like, yeah, but Germany gets it. They're like, we need smart, educated people that can help forward our economy.
Right. And we're pretty agnostic on what the next higher education financing model might look like. Maybe there will be loans, maybe there won't be. If there are going to be loans, they should have all the same consumer protections that every other loan has. And hearkening back to LBJ's very prescient prediction, they should be free of interest. The government should not be looking to our students to make a profit so it can pay for, missiles to send to, foreign countries and so forth. That's ridiculous.
No, I couldn't agree more. So it is 7:54. We got 6 minutes, man. So do you want to tell people about student loan justice itself? Like, in what you actually just talk your pitch, man. Tell us what that's about. You started at the beginning, but feel free to talk about it more, Alan.
Sure. Yeah. We've been around since 2005. We're actually the largest and the oldest actual true grassroots group, not AstroTurf like some groups out there, but we're just normal people, normal citizens We've been instrumental in the current bankruptcy bill and previous legislation. We were the first group to publicly call for the president to cancel student loans by executive order. Not thrilled with how that turned out, quite frankly. Not super impressed with what Joe Biden did, but all that is kind of unimportant compared to the absolutely critical need to return fundamental bankruptcy protections to the loans. I know that sounds weird. Nobody wants to file for bankruptcy, but it turns out that the founding fathers were really smart when they called for uniform bankruptcy laws. And so everybody out there, I would just urge to come and help us fight. These next couple months, like I'm going to say before Election Day, are the most important in the history of our group, nearly 18-year history. They can do our daily actions. They can jump on their state chapter. And their loans are their livelihood is kind of hanging on the balance of what happens here. The Democrats have a historically unique and rare opportunity to finally do what they said they were going to do. And so these next 8 weeks are absolutely critical.
Well, and nobody wants to go bankrupt is right. It's kind of, people are like, oh yeah, well, they're going to get out of it. When you go bankrupt, that's like a no joke thing. I mean, you're destroying your credit. You're doing a lot of different stuff. Unless you're a Donald Trump who went bankrupt six times.
Unless you're a sociopathic and soulless corporation, nobody wants to file for bankruptcy. But having the threat, just having the leverage of bankruptcy means everything for getting, public service, loan forgiveness, for compelling the government and the lenders to behave with a modicum of good faith. It really, it undergirds the whole entire problem. And it's really hard for me to communicate that point because everybody's gut reaction is like, I don't want to file for bankruptcy. So it's a very difficult battle, but it's the right battle to be fighting. So.
We didn't talk about the public service loan forgiveness. Lisa Ansel has offered to come actually talk about that. She has experience with it. Lisa, and I know Lisa. It's really interesting because just for those of you, since we didn't talk about it, what it amounts to is basically the government made a promise to the people who borrowed this money and said, if you go and you take a certain kind of job, like a school teacher or whatever, and you make 10 years of payments consistently on time against your student loan, at the end of that, your balance will be forgiven. Sounds awesome. Sounds fantastic. But in another government faith undermining type of process, which makes them look crap and undermines everybody's faith in our government, something like up until just lately, 99% of everybody who applied for public service loan forgiveness was rejected. Now, they are like, we've improved greatly. It's down to like 92.5% of all people who apply have been rejected. It's like, and when our government does this, and I'm kind of like government is good guy. Because I think about that, we're on the internet. Guess who invented this internet? The government, right? They did a really good job. They do a good job with stuff. So when they screw something up like this, though, that impacts millions and millions and millions of people negatively, and it shows that they can be screwed over, it literally undermines our entire faith in the United States.
And it absolutely does, Kyle. And I like to think, I'm sure the other federal agencies do a bang up job, but the Department of Education, the Office of Federal Student Aid, it has become corrupted and captured, and it has no desires or intentions of actually canceling any loans. That's just the corporate DNA, the corporate culture of this agency has coming from the Nixon days back in the early 70s. It is not a functioning. It is not functioning for the people. They are fighting only for their own institutional largesse and actual money. This is the worst predatory loan scam in U.S. history, and the people in Washington D.C. are fighting tooth and nail for it. And this goes way across all the partisan nonsense. This is the swamp, I like to call it, and Virginia Fox is their number one henchman.
Well, let's keep on scrapping. I mean, that's the thing. You're at studentloanjustice.org. If you are watching and you have a student loan and a problem, please reach out to them. I mean, you need to support what Alan's doing. You need to support their group. I personally am running for Congress to help the people of the Fifth. As he pointed out, 100,000 people in the Fifth, 85,000 of whom are actually underwater on these
Losing
loans,
sleep. Yeah.
yeah, they should be listening. Don't be a single issue voter, but this is a big issue for a lot of people that could improve their financial lives.
They should be marking it. They should be tattooing on their arm the location of the polls or whatever they need to do, get their ass out of bed, pardon my French, and come vote for you, Kyle. I'm serious. It's that important.
But and so thanks. And I mean,
in my humble opinion.
Well, and I appreciate that. And in my humble opinion too, they should vote for me. Well, and it's because literally this seems like a no-brainer. I mean, it does. And Virginia Fox has been a blocker on this for so damn long. Literally, it's like the Education and Labor Committee, on which she is the ranking member, I believe, from the GOP, constantly talks about Virginia Fox and student loans, and she's constantly attacking student debt as if it's some kind of free handout. But you'll never hear her attack corporate subsidies. You'll never hear her attack PPP loans. You'll never. But if it's the little guy, she's all over it. So vote Kyle Parrish, November 8th. Keep coming back, people. Those that are out there, this is fun, man. And Alan, thanks for being the first guy where we did kind of like a back and forth interview show.
Absolutely, Kyle. I've been hoping to find somebody like you who's willing to stand up to the Virginia Fox for years and decades now. So at your beck and call, man. And let's see what we can get done between now and November 8th.
Perfect, man. All right. Thanks, everybody.